iFi's Go Blu is a tiny Bluetooth headphone adapter. Let's check it out. It was certainly good going after making the hip DAC for iFi to make a portable Bluetooth DAC and amp such as this, which is the Go Blu. And, well, it's a little bit shiny too. Someone mistook this for being wood. It's not wood, it's metal. But all the same, it's extremely light, lighter than even FiiO's BTR5, which is a highly popular Bluetooth DAC amp. Now, for those who do ask me, I often get asked this in the comment section of these videos. This is designed, for example, I have this iPad here, I want to connect it wirelessly to my headphones. I can turn a pair of wired headphones or in-ear monitors, such as ones I have here, into a pair of wireless headphones or in-ear monitors with this device. It's no good if you already have wireless headphones, it will not improve the sound, so you need to get wired headphones for it. But onto the actual design, I mean, it's tiny, it's only 27 grams, and I think the most noticeable thing is this cool volume knob that's on it. Now, they do kind of overhype this, saying it's kind of built like a Swiss watch control, and it does have that kind of clicky feel, but inside is, well, just a basic rotary encoder, so it's really not quite that special. That's iFi's marketing for you, which always goes well above and beyond, but at least they show you the inside. But as far as size goes, I mean, if the BTR5 is kind of the gold standard as far as these things go, and it's considerably shorter and, well, it's about the same thickness, but being lighter and smaller, well, it's certainly nice to stick in a shirt pocket. Unlike the BTR5, it has a full 4.4mm socket on there alongside a 3.5mm socket, and they claim, like the BTR5, to be fully balanced internally. Not that in something this size that particularly matters, I mean, but all the same, it has almost about the same kind of power output, roughly the same as the BTR5 at around 240 milliwatts of power, but the advantage is the single-ended output on the Go Blu is more powerful than the single-ended output of the BTR5, which gives it a one-up there. But there are I'll compare more to the BTR5 and some other things such as the dongle DAC, such as the RU6 and others, a bit later in the video. But let's just have a look at some of the features. So apart from this volume control, you have the power on button here, and then you have the function button on the side, and a button in the middle for play, pause, and tapping it a couple of times, two or three times for forward and back. That makes it a very good setup there. On the bottom you have USB-C, which can accept up to 96 kHz high res if you so desire, although it's not something I'd really consider worrying about in something this inexpensive. You also have a microphone port, so it does work as a full wireless device for if you need to receive phone calls while listening to music, and there's a reset thing there if something starts to go wrong. Now, other than that, you have a status light on the top, so if you do switch the functionality in here, it will show a status light and will also give you a rough idea whether you're listening to high res or not, although over Bluetooth there's no real such thing as high res, so it's kind of redundant. Anyway, you can still use it wired, as I said, and I used it both wired with, say, my iPad. I used it wireless. I have a FiiO M11 Plus here, and I did compare it in different setups with some headphones and in-ear monitors, so let's talk about that. For something different, I'm on my desk today. You can see I've been relaxing and listening with things. So this is actually how I've pretty much been sitting and listening with the Go Blu lately, and as well as other devices. So in that, the first thing I tend to test is with in-ear monitors. One of the popular setups for something like these devices is with various high-end in-ear monitors because it allows you to use them wirelessly. You can do that either with something like this or some of the over-ear options available from FiiO and others. So I plugged in the most sensitive in-ear monitors I have here, or I should say one of the most sensitive pairs. This is the Campfire Audio Solaris, on which I have a FiiO LCRE cable. So talk about mixing and matching stuff, which actually has good synergy incidentally, but that's another matter. All the same, these are very sensitive. They pick up hiss from devices very readily, even high-end stuff such as Chord's Hugo 2. Unfortunately, this picked up a lot of hiss out of the 4.4mm socket of the Go Blu, so it wasn't a particularly good match there. If I used the 3.5mm socket, albeit with less power, although something like in-ear monitors don't require that kind of power, even the power of the 3.5mm socket, there was considerably less hiss, and when music started it was not so noticeable. So that was a bit of an issue there. So I thought I'd also try it with regular, maybe less sensitive in-ear monitors, because the Campfires are a little bit of an outlier, and we have something like, say, Final Audio's A8000s, which are some of my favorite INEOM monitors, and there was still some hiss out of the 4.4mm socket. So that was a little bit disappointing there, that we're still getting hiss out of the Go Blu, even with regular INEOM monitors. So I'm not sure what's going on in there, but that could be some of the limitations of having something this small and neat in such a package that, well, something's got to give. Where it did go very well is with full-size headphones. So for example, I've got this pair of Meze Lyrics in here. Now I don't have a 4.4mm cable for it, but I do have the 3.5. And even so, it did a good job of driving them out of the 3.5mm socket. Just for fun even, I even got Meze's Elite headphones. So this is a $4,000 pair of headphones I'm powering out of an iFi Go Blu. And that sounds pretty disparate in terms of price. I mean, a $4,000 pair of headphones out of, what is it, $179 DAC amp. But all the same, it was interesting that it actually would do it. Where it did it best is probably where it deserves some discussion. Now, if I used it via, say, my iMac, this is the worst, which you can just see out of view here, and both of these actually sounded pretty terrible out of my iMac using the USB-C connector. And why was that? Well, something like my iMac is connected to the ground, and so that noise can flow through the ground plane into devices such as this. So it was pretty kind of harsh and not so pleasant to listen with. Where it worked really well connected was with the iPad mini. And because the iPad mini isn't connected to ground, I don't have any power source from it, no noise can pass through the ground plane. And this is where the iFi Go Blu did its best work. Now, it's already got a battery inside there, so it has an advantage over something like a dongle DAC, which requires the power of the device that it's connected to. The iFi Go Blu, having its own battery, could power full-sized headphones actually pretty impressively well without any harshness or unpleasantness, well, fairly generally, and that was a pretty impressive feat as things go. Now, I wouldn't particularly push my luck with some other $4,000 headphones, as the Meze Elites are pretty easy to drive, but generally using kind of middle-of-the-road headphones, you know, the Lyrics and stuff like, even Meze's only 99 Classics, or anything pretty much which is fairly reasonably easy to drive. I could get plenty of volume out of this, plenty of loudness. You can see the volume connector going up and down there. And it actually gave me a very satisfying listen. And now I don't listen super loud, and that's the only kind of limitation you have with something such as this Go Blu, is that even in wired mode, you do have somewhat of a volume limit, although I don't recommend blasting your ears out with headphones, as you will permanently damage your hearing. But all the same, at the moderate levels I listened to, something like I was actually listening to some newer Thievery Corporation in here, it was really fantastic. The bass quality came through very well. The mid-range, especially with vocals, I was listening to some other stuff down here, such, well, there's a variety I can go through if you can see the playlist on here. Harry Manx is one of my favorites lately. The vocals actually came through pretty good on that. Probably the only limitation was maybe the treble was still a touch edgy using it in wired mode. And using it in wireless mode, such as LDAC from the FiiO, that was maybe a little bit more edgy still, as tends to be the limitation of Bluetooth transmission, is the treble is what suffers first. But also the drive and dynamics seem to be a bit better coming out of something like the iPad mini directly. But the Bluetooth device, which is what it's primarily designed for, with LDAC mode engaged, was actually really nice to listen with. Despite the kind of hiss you got out of even with less sensitive IEMs, it still did a pretty good job. And at least that if you do have very sensitive IEMs, if you use them with the 3.5mm socket, it won't be too bad. Although if you're one of those people like a friend of mine who absolutely can't stand even the minutest amount of hiss, well, then you might be disappointed. So that's where it might be time to move into comparisons. So the obvious comparison is BTR5, which kind of sets the standard for devices of this type. So in that, the BTR5, well, has some disadvantages and some advantages. First of all, the iFi has the advantage of this excellent volume control. So being able to control the volume via this is just wonderful. However, with other aspects, for example, the BTR5 comes with its own clip case. And I've got to tell you, for a portable device, being able to clip it to your clothing is a real advantage. iFi, you really need to get a clip case made for this thing. It will be so much better. One of the other advantages the BTR5 has is no hiss on the outputs with INEOM monitors. And it was far better for use for INEOM monitors than the Go Blu, which, as I said, was very hissy on the output. One of the other things is the BTR5 has some more sophisticated features. It has a little menu option. You can change things such as the filters. You can change with USB to USB 2 or 1 if necessary, if you want to connect it to something older that won't deal with USB 2 products. You can change the gain. You can change it if you can turn off charging from the input. If you're plugging it into a phone via the USB-C port, you can turn charging off. And it has car mode, which allows it to automatically switch on and off if power is received through the USB-C socket. So you plug it into your car, for example, and then when the car turns on, so does this. And when the car turns off, it turns off. And comparing the sound of them, well, with in-ear monitors, ignoring the hiss factor in that, I felt that the BTR5 sounded a little bit more spacious using the LDC Bluetooth transmission, which is likely how most people would use it, versus the iFi, which sounded maybe a little bit closed in. It was fairly close between them, but I'd say the BTR5 won out very clearly with in-ear monitors. The other thing that came up was using the USB-C connection is I couldn't always at full volume get a loud volume output from the BTR5, whereas I could more readily with the iFi, which even connected via USB to my iMac. Even when I got to what seemed to be maximum volume on the iMac, I could keep turning and get still louder. Now, some extra things you probably noticed I haven't mentioned are the extra bass and extra space options. That's one of the advantages it has over something like the BTR5. That's one of iFi's signature features. So when it's powered on, if you press this button on the side under the volume control, you'll notice a different color light popping up. Now, the first setting that comes up is the extra bass. The second one is extra space with cyan, and then white for both engaged. And actually, when I turn it on, it defaults to extra bass, incidentally. It seemed to do that consistently well, because I noticed there was too much bass coming through my elites when I first did that. Now, the extra bass doesn't put it through a lot more bass. It's kind of a gentle boost to the bass, and I think when you turn the volume up, you notice it more, especially with full-sized headphones. The extra space gives a touch more airy treble, and it's more noticeable when you switch it off and actually then or switch both of them off, and then that kind of disappears. So it's like a very gentle, like old school stereo loudness control that you used to get on stereo receivers and amplifiers and the like, which would just gently boost the bass and the treble slightly to give you kind of a more spacious feel. And I'm glad they didn't overdo it. It just is a very gentle adjustment, especially the extra space, which is almost barely noticeable. But still, whether it's on or off, I think it didn't make a hugely significant difference, but could give that slight edge, especially when you want just a touch more bass from, say, your headphones. So I'd say the BTR5 wins out on in-ear monitor use and the range of features that are available, whereas the iFi wins out on full-sized headphone use, where it actually, especially plugged in wired, really does kick ass actually pretty impressively well for something that's only $179 odd. Versus a dongle DAC is another matter altogether. Now you can probably see I've got Cayin's actually USB-C connector here. Now versus a dongle DAC doesn't have its own power source. So it is reliant on the amount of power that can be provided by the device you're connected to. And in that, using full-sized headphones, well, that was where you noticed to kind of say a drop-off in bass with the RU6 versus the iFi, which gave very full and very punchy bass, even with high-end headphones. The RU6 succeeded very well in being good with in-ear monitors. It has far less hiss. It doesn't have as good a volume control. Things like the Luxury and Precision W2 did a far better job, of course, with having a useful volume control on there for in-ear monitors, given that it doesn't have some of the limitations that had to be built into the RU6. So in that, well, it actually, if you want something that's portable, if you want to turn a pair of full-sized headphones into a pair of Bluetooth headphones, the iFi Go Blu does a really excellent job. With in-ear monitors, it doesn't do quite so well. I'd stick to something like the BTR5 or maybe a dongle DAC as necessary, depending on the kind of setup you want to do. But I was really impressed with full-sized headphones, how it worked, and it was really nice to be able to twiddle this knob. Now, iFi, all you need is you to get someone to make a good case for you so you can clip it to your clothing, and it would be, at least for portable full-sized headphone use, near perfect. So that's the iFi Go Blu for you. It was really great for iFi to send me one of these over. If you do have any questions, comments, criticisms of the video, other things you'd like me to cover, if you've bought one and own one, please do comment below. It really helps out other people if they don't just get my opinion, but they get other people's opinions, especially people who have to buy these things and don't just get them from the manufacturer. Also, if you do think that the iFi Go Blu could be for you, consider buying it through the links in the description. Now, I don't get anything from this link unless you actually keep it and don't send it back, so it's of no interest of mine to have people buy these things who are going to dislike them in the end. So please do consider that. Also, if you'd like my buying advice, do consider becoming a patron or member. Becoming one helps me out and helps me make these videos, and I'm also happy to help you out in exchange, get a good system going, and you can join our little community of members and join in all the fun as you build a good listening system for yourself and for your needs. As always though, thanks for watching, and I'll see you online.